What's up, guys? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more of our videos. Also, make sure you follow us all over social media so you don't miss any of our content or show announcements. You ready to apologize to Tatum yet? Like yourself, I'm a huge Ant fan, but that number 5 slot belongs to Jason, and you know it. Tatum is averaging more points per game, assists per game, rebounds per game, steals per game, fewer turnovers, higher true shooting percentage, and significantly higher PER than Anthony Edwards, all while remaining the better all-around defender. Not to mention, he's the only player in the NBA currently averaging the most points, assists, rebounds, and steals on his team. A couple things. Apology is a really strong word to use for, I had one guy 5th and one guy 7th on a list where I told you guys from 5 to 11, I view almost no gap. I had 1 through 4 as kind of their own thing, and I said 5 through 11 are all this close to each other. So, I think apology is a little dramatic. That said, there's no doubt that Tatum has played like the guy that's the best of that next tier of stars to start this year. I think Jokic is rock solid at number 1. Luka's off to a bad start this year, but you're not going to supplant him over a dozen games when he missed training camp with a calf injury. Luka's gonna play a lot better over the large sample. And then Giannis is playing some of the best basketball of his career, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is really starting to pick up steam here in recent weeks. So that tier to me is still more or less what it was. But if you're looking at the next tier of teams or next tier of players, the 2 guys that have really separated, I'll say 3 guys, the 3 guys that have, honestly, there are a lot of guys that are playing good basketball right now. Anthony Davis has really separated himself. Jayson Tatum has really separated himself. Kevin Durant has really separated himself. Steph Curry hasn't had the overall counting stats that he needs in that department, but he's had some of the most impressive individual performances this season, and he's outplayed multiple guys that are above him in the rankings. He outplayed Tatum head-to-head. He outplayed Shai Gilgeous-Alexander head-to-head. He outplayed Nikola Jokic head-to-head, right? So, those are the guys that are separating from that, lower group. But I would say night to night in overall production and, all of the little things that impact winning, the best player that I've seen from that next tier of teams to start this season is Jayson Tatum. And so there's no doubt that he has been the guy that has, at least through this small sample to start the year, taken that 5 spot. It's been a bunch of different things. The jump shot, which, I've been on this entire summer. I think a lot of people were just oh, he's too buff now, he's not going to shoot. And anybody who's played basketball for any significant amount of time knows, sometimes you just go in a shooting slump. Sometimes you, I think about even in my adult life, I had shooting slumps when I was in college where there are stretches where I shot the ball really well. And then I had stretches where I had a season in conference play where I shot damn near 50% from 3. And then the very next season at the start in non-conference play, I had a week where I missed 22 straight threes in a single week. So sometimes you just go into a slump. But even in my adult life, and I work on my jump shot a lot, probably more than I should as someone who doesn't get paid to play basketball. I have stretches where it's sometimes for 2-3 months, I'm just not quite shooting the ball as well. And then I have other stretches where 2-3 months, it's I can't fucking miss to save my life. There's different kind of just oscillations that take place for jump shooters. It's kind of part of the way it goes. And I thought Tatum was just in a slump last year. And I thought that he was going to come out of it in a big way to start the season. And he has. One of the big things I was talking about in yesterday's show was he's been doing a really nice job of hitting contested catch and shoot threes by just kind of hesitating and waiting for the closeout to come and for the guy to sit in a stance to try to slide his feet. And then right in that gap when the defender kind of closes out high and then sits, he's rising and firing and he's hitting a lot of shots in those situations. But I also think he's made a significant step forward as a passer this year. He's had 4 straight games with at least 6 assists. He's averaging a career high in assists. He's getting his assists in all these different ways that you see from some of the best playmakers in the league. And as you pointed out, he is the better all-around defender, not just in Anthony Edwards, but he's one of the best all-around defenders in the league. So here's the thing. Going into the season, yes, I ranked Anthony Edwards at 5 and Tatum at 7 in a tier of players that was 7 players big that I viewed all more or less on the same level. So am I going to be I'm so sorry, Jayson Tatum? No, of course not. That's stupid. That's foolish. That's dramatic. But yeah, Jayson Tatum's been the best of that tier of 7 guys, in my opinion, to start the season. One last thing on Anthony Edwards. a lot of my Anthony Edwards optimism stems on the fact that I just think he's an awesome jump shooter. And I think that that's real. And we're on a massive sample size now of him doing that. And by the way, Anthony Edwards is averaging 28 points per game on 60% true shooting to start the year. So he's not having a bad season either. There are just guys in that tier that have been playing better than him. And one thing I would give Ant a little bit of slack on is the roster is a little janky because the front office threw a massive curveball at them a week before training camp. And now they're like the Knicks trying to like figure out how to be a new team on the fly. So like, and we have a question about that later on in the mailbag, but for the Knicks and Wolves, I think it's foolish to jump to like sweeping declarations about them until we're much, 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 much further into the season. But again, shout out to Jayson Tatum. Again, there's a question about this. I'll actually fast forward and get to this one if I can see it. We'll get to it when we get there because I don't want to waste a bunch of time searching through this right now. But like, there's a lot of people that like take these like kind of pretty mild stances that I take and turn them into like Jason hates that guy. And that I just don't understand because like, that's just not the case. Like just because I have a slightly different opinion than a specific fan base on a player doesn't mean I dislike a player. I think that sometimes is once again kind of dramatic and unfair. Thank you for giving Tatum his credit. This was the question I was looking for earlier. Thank you for giving Tatum his credit. In years past, I feel like you've disregarded a lot of what he does because of your own admission he's not one of your favorite players. But I appreciate not only your objectivity, but also how you went into depth about how his play style shifted this season. I think I've been the most impressed by him this season, understanding when it's him that really needs to take over. Every Celtics game this season, it feels like there are 1 to 2 stretches per game where Tatum alone will go down and score 8-12 consecutive points for the Celtics when he's out there with the bench unit. Usually it happens towards the end of the first quarter or the middle of the third quarter. This was kind of what I was getting at earlier, where it's like, I argue Tatum is 7 instead of 5, and everyone thinks I hate the guy. Like, yeah, you're right. He's not my favorite player, but I don't like dislike him that much either. Like there are basketball players that I watch where like I don't like watching them. Like Luka's like that. Joel Embiid is like that for me. Jalen Brunson's getting a little there for me with some of the grifty stuff. But even then, even when I don't like the guys, I have such a love and respect for the game of basketball that like I still watch Luka, and it's like even though he irritates me sometimes, I'm like, God, that's impressive. God, this is impressive. Like I still look at what they do and have appreciation for it. Same goes for Joel Embiid. Same, like the footwork and the skill is impressive. Like Joel Embiid is like legitimately like a good 3-point shooter now. It's like, it's crazy. You know how hard he's had to work to do that? Like I feel like if he's open and gets a good look, I feel like it's going in. Like there's a lot that I appreciate about those guys too. Now Tatum isn't like my favorite player, but I don't actively dislike him either. But I've always had an appreciation for everything he does well. And a lot of times it turns into this thing where it's like, okay, I have this guy at 5 instead of 7, and I have this guy at 7 instead of 5. And people interpret that as like, you hate this guy, or you're thinking he's the 17th best player or the 24th best player. That's silly. I've always viewed Tatum as like one of the guys that's in that second tier of stars, right below the top of the league. So most Celtics fans actually agree with me. That's the crazy part. Most Celtics fans agree with me. There's a segment of Celtics fans that think he's in the Giannis, Luka, Jokic tier. And look, here's the thing. With the way he's starting this season, like he's getting certainly closer to that tier. As I said in the beginning of the mailbag, I think he's at the top of that second tier at the start of this season. But like, yeah, I feel like I've always talked about Tatum being a versatile defender. I think I've always talked about Tatum being a guy who's made strides as a playmaker in recent years. I've just also pointed out things like, yeah, dude, you rely a lot on tough jump shot making. And this year he's making them, which is making him look like a better player. But in years past, he's relied on tough jump shot making and not made them. And it's been an issue for him. It's been an issue that's extended to even the Olympic team not wanting him in the rotation. Like I feel like the criticism that I levied was fair. And so that's kind of where that comes from. And I want people to understand, like when I talk about a player's like upsides and downsides, I'm just trying to do my job. And when I rank players in specific spots, it doesn't mean a lot of times if I'm arguing for a couple spots lower, I'll bring up some negatives, but that doesn't mean I think the guy is 15th or something along those lines. And honestly, like one of the things that I've seen a lot with Tatum fans too is they'll be like, why don't you ever criticize so-and-so for this? Why don't you ever criticize so-and-so for that? And like, I feel like if you watch this show, you can tell I do criticize even the top players in the league. I'd argue I criticize the top players in the league more. Ask Jokic fans. There's a lot of Jokic fans that get upset with me because last year I said he couldn't shoot and he had a shitty defensive season. Like, that's the guy that I think is the best player in the league, and I was openly criticizing his shooting and his defense throughout the entire second half of the season and in the playoffs. Luka Doncic, I said that the defensive performance he had in the finals was the worst defensive performance I've ever seen in the finals. Giannis, I talk all the time about how in the half court, he can really struggle to be as decisive and efficient as his teammates as his peers at the top of the league. I've talked about how he hasn't as good of a defensive season as he did last year. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I've criticized him for not being as much of a willing passer or surgical half-court passer as he needs to be. Like, I am critical of all the players at the top of the league, not just Jayson Tatum. If you think I'm only being critical of Jayson Tatum, then you're only listening to my Celtics content and you're only reacting to the stuff I'm saying about Jayson Tatum. So again, I wanted to clarify that because I think it's become something that has slipped through the cracks a little bit.